In the early 2000s, Disney was looking to expand its brand into the booming online gaming market. Seeing the success of virtual worlds and early MMORPGs, Disney decided to create its own lighthearted and family-friendly online world, based on its iconic characters and animation style. Thus, ToonTown Online was born in 2003. It's tempting to look at ToonTown as just a lame kid's ripoff of something like World of Warcraft, but WoW actually released a year later than ToonTown, in 2004. Warcraft was hardly the first MMO on the market though. Trailblazers like Ultima Online and EverQuest had long since blazed the trail for the genre, so ToonTown still had a template to borrow from. Developed by Disney's VR studio in collaboration with Shell Games, with development beginning as early as 1998, according to studio head Jesse Shell, ToonTown immersed players in a vibrant cartoon town, populated by classic Disney characters like Mickey Mouse, Donald Duck, and Minnie Mouse. Players could create their own customizable cartoon avatar, fittingly called a Toon, which they would use to explore the world, interact with other players, and complete missions. The art style and gameplay were designed to be reminiscent of the golden era rubber hose style of animation from the 1930s and 40s. The graphics used stylized faux cell shaded 3D models to make the world look like it was drawn by hand. The audio also evoked classic cartoon sound effects, like bubbles popping, xylophone dings, and boinging springs to accentuate the actions on screen. The whole thing was a love letter to the kind of cartoons that built the Disney brand. And to anyone who loved them, being able to step into a world like that was a hook all of its own. Gameplay in ToonTown was based around light role-playing mechanics. Toons could take on various professions like fishing, farming, or battling cogs, the main villains of ToonTown. Cogs were corporate robot invaders that aimed to conquer ToonTown and turn it into a dull corporate wasteland. There were a bunch of different types of cogs, each belonging to one of 4 corporate ladders: sellbots, cashbots, lawbots, and bossbots. Each cog has its own set of attacks and a level range that determines its health and attack damage. And get this, there's actually an entire backstory to this as well, where apparently Scrooge McDuck wanted to increase the efficiency in his business. So he invests in a company that will create robot executives to run his companies instead of people. In doing so, he accidentally releases a robot from a company he invested in, and it starts to create all the cogs, and also imprisons Scrooge himself? And pretty wild stuff. How about that for some lore? Wait a second. Creative, fun-loving everymen fighting against cold, corporate encroachment? Against enemies with no creativity or individuality? That are literally called cogs? And an effort by executives to replace human labor with AI? No wonder Disney wanted this thing dead. The cogs are basically a Tuesday morning for Bob Iger. Who would have guessed that ToonTown was so based? In-game, cogs can be found roaming the streets of ToonTown, taking over buildings by dropping their own cog buildings on top of them. Each type of cog also has their respective headquarters on the outskirts of ToonTown. Players either tackle fighting the cogs on the streets of the town itself, or invade the cog buildings that have popped up, going through each floor and clearing out the cogs inside, liberating the building and returning it to its normal state. The combat itself was designed to be very non-violent and kid-friendly, keeping with the slapstick spirit of Disney cartoons. Toons don't fight the cogs in a traditional sense, but instead, in another nod to the classic cartoons that inspired the game, use classic cartoon gags like throwing pies and squirting seltzer bottles and dropping anvils and deploying traps to damage the cogs and make them explode in a shower of gears. Apparently, just like real suits, the cogs aren't a fan of humor either. Unlike more hardcore MMOs, ToonTown opted for an accessible, casual combat system, suitable for younger audiences. There were no complex statistics or gear, just the occasional equipable gag or clothing item. Leveling up didn't truly exist either. Toon simply unlocked more content on their skill tree, which is called a gag track. You could expand the amount of gags at your disposal to fight cogs. Now, there were 7 different gag tracks, each with a different style of gag that leveraged different effects in battle, such as high accuracy basic attacks, low accuracy but high damage, AoE attacks, healing, and defensive buffs. The only numbers that players had to keep track of were their Toon's laugh meter, essentially your HP, which increased as you used gags and completed Toon tasks, and jelly beans, the game's currency, which you could use to buy in-game items or new gag tracks. Battles were relatively straightforward, cooperative affairs, rather than intense, hardcore dungeons and raids. They also played differently as well, closer to a traditional turn-based RPG like Dragon Quest, rather than the more complicated, highly coordinated combat systems of skills and cooldowns in something like WoW. ToonTown also leaned heavily into its social features. Players could fully customize their Toon's appearance, their house, and outside garden. They could host parties, meet other players, and form groups together to complete tasks and take on cogs as a team. Shared hubs like the playgrounds, shops, and City Hall hosted lively player interactions. There were also activities like racing, solving puzzles, and playing minigames that Toons could participate in to flesh out the gameplay. Of course, most of this had guardrails to make sure the space was safe for its target demographic. Public chatting was restricted to a series of canned drop-down phrases, with open chat only being allowed in DMs once you added someone to your friend list. Now, while ToonTown was clearly a kid's game and a vessel to promote the Disney brand, the game actually garnered pretty solid reviews from traditional gaming press outlets when it was released in 2003, with a solid 81 currently on Metacritic, though to be fair, only from a handful of reviews. It was actually a good game, and fun to play regardless of your age, which was a rare thing in the early 2000s for licensed titles. Commercially, though, the game started off slowly, with a relatively small initial player base. So, what did Disney do? Oh, they did what they do best. No, not kill it. Not yet. Marketing. They began running an aggressive marketing campaign for the title, just flooding the airwaves with commercials trying to get kids to give the game a shot. And if you watch the Disney Channel at all during the mid-2000s, no doubt, in the recesses of your mind, you can hear the echoes of that commercial. Yeah, you know the one.
ToonTown, are you Toon enough?
Now you'll never forget it. ToonTown, rated E for everyone. Despite its initial praise from critics and the avalanche of marketing hype, ToonTown Online struggled to find a foothold in the online gaming market. Now, one of the biggest challenges for the game was that it used a subscription-based revenue model. Accessing ToonTown required a $10 month fee, similar to other large-scale MMOs. Now, while this is a viable business model for adults with their own disposable income, having to charge for a kids game meant that growth was dependent on parents' permission. And in the mid-2000s, paying for something that only existed in the computer was still not exactly a common thing yet. Trust me, I went through those growing pains with Warcraft. I'm trying to convince my mom to let me buy it. Disney tried addressing this by partnering with Sony to release ToonTown on a physical disc, which would be sold in stores, making the game feel a bit more tangible. But still, $10 a month was a tough hurdle to overcome. But even more damningly, ToonTown would eventually meet its match from another kid's online social space that launched a little over a year after it. An industry juggernaut that would go on to define the kids' online space. Yeah, you guessed it, Club Penguin. Both titles were vying for the same demographic, and both had a similar cartoon angle, even though the games themselves were massively different. But once Club Penguin started gaining momentum, ToonTown was never able to achieve the same level of popularity. While ToonTown had a small but loyal fan base, it failed to meet Disney's lofty expectations. By 2008, The game peaked at just over 700,000 monthly subscribers, a far cry from the millions of Club Penguin. Disney tried various initiatives to bolster ToonTown's popularity, including marketing tie-ins with Disney movie releases and theme parks, even going so far as hosting 2 in-person events for the game in 2006 and 2007, called ToonFest. ToonTown also moved to a freemium model in 2010, allowing free access, but charging for subscriptions and microtransactions. While ToonTown struggled, Club Penguin flourished into the dominant force in virtual worlds. Seeing the writing on the wall with ToonTown never being able to match what Club Penguin had become, Disney figured, if you can't beat 'em, buy 'em. And they purchased the IP for an astounding $350 million in 2007. Disney now possessed the clear market leader in online kids entertainment, making ToonTown seem a bit redundant. After the acquisition, Disney funneled more resources into furthering Club Penguin, while ToonTown updates and new content slowed to a crawl. Disney cross-promoted its properties on Club Penguin, while ToonTown received no major new franchise tie-ins. Essentially, Club Penguin became Disney's premier virtual world, while ToonTown was left in maintenance mode. By 2013, Disney saw little need to keep ToonTown operational anymore. To the disappointment of all its loyal fans, ToonTown was permanently shut down by Disney on September 9th, 2013, with Disney making their choice on what online world they wanted to support. In the end, ToonTown was overshadowed and made obsolete by Disney's own runaway acquisition of Club Penguin. The purchase of an established success diverted attention and resources away from the struggling ToonTown, and ultimately led Disney to shutter it. However, ToonTown would not be so easily beaten. Though Disney abandoned ToonTown, its most dedicated players refused to let the game they loved die. Shortly after the closure, fans rallied to reverse engineer the game code and launched their own version in 2014, called ToonTown Rewritten. This non-profit, community-run revival allowed players to return to ToonTown, and this time completely for free, no subscription required. Powered by volunteer coders, artists, and designers, and of course the unflinching passion of its fans, ToonTown Rewritten authentically recreated the original game experience. It featured nearly everything players loved about the original release, with the sole exception being that they mostly ignored re-implementing any dynamic content featuring copyrighted Disney characters. Good call. While there are certain parts of the game where they're baked in, other dynamic elements that featured them that would take extra effort were intentionally left alone to keep the project as much off the radar of Disney's legal team as possible. The team kept the game up to date by adding in new limited-time events, activities, and tweaking balancing. Also adding quality-of-life improvements, like customizable controls, to make the game control more like a contemporary title. Visuals were cleaned up as well, with textures and other art assets up-resed to look better on modern, larger, high-resolution displays. The team has even recently added entirely new content to the game, with new neighborhoods to explore and the town itself. ToonTown Rewritten grew swiftly, as word spread amongst former ToonTown fans. It hit 1 million registered player accounts in 2016. And today, the game still maintains a respectable player base in the thousands, over 10 years after Disney abandoned it. ToonTown Rewritten brought the community together, gave new life to a cherished online world. Though it lacks Disney's resources, ToonTown Rewritten captures the original magic through pure fan passion. Against the odds, this grassroots revival has kept the heart and humor of this classic virtual playground alive for both nostalgic veterans and a new generation of gamers who may have been too young to try the game back in its heyday, or simply never got around to giving it a shot. That would be me. In addition to ToonTown Rewritten, another prominent fan revival emerged in 2017, called ToonTown Corporate Clash. This modification also recreated the original game, but took the gameplay in new directions. Corporate Clash introduces a deeper character creator, adding new animal types you can choose from to create your toon, as well as an entirely new onboarding tutorial section that explains the myriad of tweaked and expanded gameplay mechanics that Corporate Clash features. While ToonTown Rewritten adheres closely to the original, Corporate Clash opts for a more ambitious reimagining of the core formula. It appeals to veteran ToonTown fans looking for new challenges and innovations alongside the classic gameplay. Combat and progression gets an overhaul, adopting more traditional leveling up that has come to dominate the genre today, to meld the unique aspects of ToonTown with something a bit more contemporary. It also dials up the difficulty, adding an entirely new swath of raid-like encounters that will challenge even the most experienced veterans of the game. These raids feature entirely new boss cogs, called board bots, created from the ground up by the community. Models, animations, even theme songs for the fights are all created and integrated perfectly into the existing game. It is crazy impressive work, with dedicated developers continually expanding the world. Corporate Clash offers a reinvigorated take on ToonTown for old and new players alike. Though not as sizable as Rewritten, Corporate Clash shows the creative ways fans have kept ToonTown alive. The passion on display to breathe new life into a decade-old MMO while still paying homage to the original, while also evolving the gameplay and technology? That is highly impressive. ToonTown's spirit lives on through the tireless efforts of its player community. Both of these private servers are still very active to this day. If you've never played the game before, and it seems like something up your alley, hey, go check them out. They are literally free to play. Overall, the tale of ToonTown Online and its massively creative community reflects the defiant, carefree spirit embedded in its cartoon world. Despite being crushed under the weight of Disney's cold corporate priorities, ToonTown sprung back to life thanks to the sheer willpower of its fans. Their efforts to bring back ToonTown from its demise parallels the game's own themes of wacky toons fending off drab corporations. No matter what challenges arise, the ToonTown community persists in its mission to keep the game they love alive. Fans still believe that this game matters and deserves to exist. It's a valiant effort not only for fans of the title itself, but for gaming preservation in general, something that the industry at large is criminally uninterested in. So many of these flash-in-the-pan branded games are lost as quickly as they arrived on the market, because they're considered by their publishers as products instead of art. But the volunteers for both ToonTown Rewritten and Corporate Clash are doing their part to push back against this trend. Through their efforts, ToonTown remains accessible to anyone with an internet connection. I mean, just a few months ago, I was at MomoCon in Atlanta, and I saw that there was a booth for ToonTown Rewritten, though I was too introverted to say hi. But it was neat seeing them there in person. They also had a panel. It was called ToonFest 2023, which is a reference to the event once hosted by Disney. And the panel featured the volunteer staff talking about upcoming releases for the game, and a cosplay contest, and just generally fans showing their continued love for something that clearly means a lot to them. Something they're continuing to fight to keep alive. Previous unofficial ToonFest events have actually involved Jesse Schell, the head of Schell Games who originally developed ToonTown, and is still incredibly passionate about the game his team created, and to this day is trying to revive the game in an official capacity. Overall, I just think it's very cool to see the efforts of these people. There is something really special here, and we can't discount that in this current landscape of gaming. To take something Disney abandoned as soon as they found a bigger golden goose, or I guess penguin, and keep it around even longer than the product that tried to replace it. To everyone on the ToonTown Rewritten and Corporate Clash teams, you have all of my utmost respect. The passion and talent to do what you all have done is impressive and inspiring. So again, go check out ToonTown if you want, it's for free. And if you want to know more about the demise of Club Penguin, the game that, punched ToonTown in the face in an official way but is now dead in the ground or the ice, we got a video about that too, right there in the link. So if you all have ever played ToonTown, leave a comment down below, I'm curious, and we'll see you all next time.